You think you are searching for love, but what you are truly searching for is an escape from the ache of being. We call it romance, we dress it in poetry, we frame it in the language of eternity. Yet beneath every confession of love trembles a hidden motive. The wish to silence loneliness, the hunger to dissolve into another, the yearning to be delivered from the prison of the self. But no one tells you this, because if they did, the entire theater of love would collapse overnight. Look closely at the moment you fall for someone. There's that trembling in the chest, that surge of meaning as if the world has suddenly organized itself around one face, one voice, one body. But this is not revelation, it is hypnosis. You are not seeing them. You are seeing the end of your inner hunger projected onto their form. Desire is the imagination of relief. We love not because the other is perfect, but because the pain inside us demands a face to wear. That is why every great love begins with blindness, because truth would spoil the illusion before it begins. And so, love walks in with a candle in one hand and a knife in the other. It promises to save you from yourself, but it always ends by revealing how little of you can ever be saved. This is not cynicism, this is anatomy. Every heartbeat that accelerates in love belongs not to your soul, but to nature's machinery, a biological orchestra disguising itself as poetry. Nature, cunning as ever, discovered the only way to ensure her continuation was to make her puppets believe they were in love. She dressed the instinct to reproduce in the garments of metaphysical yearning. She transformed survival into sonnet. She made the perpetuation of the species feel like divine longing. And so, we chase, we ache, we kneel before beauty, thinking we are free agents of choice, when in truth, we are marionettes in silk. You call it passion. She calls it programming. Every gesture of affection, every sleepless night, every trembling confession, it is all the will to life speaking through you. Schopenhauer was mercilessly clear. We are not lovers, but instruments. Love is not an act of freedom. It is the species using you to write its next line of existence. Think of it, every sigh you ever breathed in someone's name was not yours. It was borrowed breath from the ancient chain of life that refuses to end. And when you say, I cannot live without you, the truth hiding beneath it is far colder. Life cannot live without itself. That is the origin of the beautiful lie. The lover believes they are seeking union, but what they are truly seeking is to serve a will older than consciousness. A will that laughs at morality, mocks ideals, and uses ecstasy as bait. The tragedy is that love feels sacred because illusion must feel divine for the trap to hold. The sweetness of affection, the tenderness of touch, the poetry of devotion, all of it functions as anesthesia. It numbs you long enough for the will to fulfill its command. Once its work is done, it releases you empty, trembling, confused. You wake from the trance with the aftertaste of eternity fading on your tongue. And then begins the second act, the morning of illusion. You wonder why love hurts more than anything else. It is because no other lie is so beautifully constructed, no other deception so intricately woven into the nervous system. You can forgive betrayal, but not the death of meaning. And when love ends, it is not the person you mourn, it is the loss of the illusion that life itself had finally justified your suffering. Listen carefully. Every great heartbreak is an initiation into truth. When the beloved leaves, the fever breaks. You glimpse, for a moment, the machinery behind the curtain, the will still turning, indifferent, inexhaustible. You see that what you called connection was merely the meeting of two appetites briefly aligned. Yet you will still long for it again, because the will never ceases. It invents new faces, new stories, new promises, each one convincing enough to keep you circling the same abyss. And you, hoping for redemption, will name it love once more. You will say, this time it's different. But what has changed is not the nature of love, only the costume of illusion. What if I told you that love, as humanity worships it, was never meant to fulfill? It was designed to keep you reaching, to bind you to existence through perpetual hunger. The poets call it longing. The philosophers call it the will. Nature calls it continuity. And you, poor creature of consciousness, call it destiny. There is a terrible elegance in this design. The same force that builds civilizations, writes symphonies, and sacrifices everything for beauty is the same force that ensures you never find rest. Desire sustains creation, but it also condemns it to endless repetition. In every lover's whisper hides the echo of the cosmic joke. The universe keeps itself alive by making its creatures believe they are in love. But there is one moment, a brief, luminous second when illusion trembles. It happens in the stillness between breaths, when the person you adore stands before you, and something in you senses the truth. They cannot save you. Their beauty, their affection, their warmth, it is all temporary architecture around a void that no one can fill. For what you seek is not a person, but a return to the pre-suffering state, the womb of silence before consciousness began to ache for meaning. Love is nostalgia for the peace that never existed, and so the tragedy continues. We chase what cannot be found, worship what cannot save, and destroy what we cannot keep. Each time believing that this, finally, is love, when it is only the will draped in longing. Desire begins long before you ever meet the one you think you love. It is born in the moment the self becomes aware of its incompleteness. From that wound, the entire theater of longing unfolds. We like to think that love starts with attraction, that glance across the room, that spark, that invisible thread. But that thread is not connection, it is tension. A pull between two voids, each hoping the other can serve as a bridge over their own abyss. You call it chemistry. It is the will recognizing another vessel it can use. The body aches, the mind spins stories, the soul trembles, yet what trembles is not transcendence, but necessity disguised as meaning. Love is hunger mythologized. The ancient will that moves all creatures, the same will that drives the lion to the hunt, the moth to the flame, the flower toward the sun, finds in human consciousness a new disguise. It can no longer act as raw impulse, so it cloaks itself in poetry. It must convince you that your servitude to it is sacred, and so it tells you, this is love. It gives you visions of soulmates, promises of completion, the illusion of destiny. But destiny is only the will's camouflage, the story it whispers, so you do not resist its pull. Because if you saw the machinery for what it was, you would stop moving, you would rebel, and the will cannot allow that. So it bribes you with ecstasy. It lets you feel the divine for a few seconds, so you'll spend the rest of your life chasing the echo. Every great seduction is just the will's game of mirrors, one hunger seducing another, both pretending to be whole. And the tragedy is that they succeed, for a while. Desire gives you purpose. It gives your emptiness a direction. And that direction feels like life itself. But fulfillment is the death of desire. And the will cannot die. So the moment you touch what you thought you wanted, the machinery begins to corrode from within. The lover's warmth that once felt like salvation begins to suffocate. The silence that once felt like peace begins to rot into boredom. And the heart, incapable of stillness, begins to seek again a new illusion, a new spark, a new excuse to feel alive. This is not failure, it is design. The will does not want your happiness, it wants your movement, because your suffering sustains the world. Schopenhauer saw it clearly. Life is the dream of a blind will that must keep hungering to stay alive. And love is the dream within that dream, the illusion that our hunger has meaning. But look closer. What is the lover's gaze except the longing for self-forgetfulness? When you stare into their eyes, you are not seeing them. You are trying to disappear, to lose the unbearable awareness of being I. You think you are merging with another. In truth, you are fleeing from yourself. This is why desire always burns more intensely in absence than in presence. The fantasy of union is more intoxicating than union itself, because fantasy is pure, untouched by reality's decay. The beloved is perfect only in distance. The closer you come, the more you see the cracks. And the will recoils, terrified by its own reflection, because every human being is the same machinery wearing a different mask. To desire another is to desire yourself, displaced and disguised. The tragedy is that consciousness wants permanence, but the will only knows repetition. We want eternal love. The will wants eternal motion, so it keeps creating new appetites, new illusions, new beginnings, and calls this life. Desire is clever. It tells you, this one will be different. It makes you believe that the next embrace will finally quiet the noise inside, and you follow again and again, because the lie feels better than the silence. But every fulfillment is followed by fatigue. Every kiss by the faint taste of disappointment. Because desire's true goal is not satisfaction, it is continuation. It needs to sustain the ache, not heal it. And so it arranges your life as a cycle. You want, you chase, you possess, you decay, and then you want again. The lover becomes the drug, and absence the withdrawal. The will keeps you intoxicated, just enough to keep you alive, never enough to make you free. Freedom would mean stillness, and stillness is death to the will. That is why even in love's most ecstatic moments, there is a faint, inescapable melancholy, the knowledge that this too will fade. It is not cynicism that whispers this truth, it is wisdom. Every lover knows it in their bones, but few dare to admit it. Behind every forever lies the shadow of boredom or loss. The heart is not built for peace, it needs tension to feel real. The poets celebrate longing, not fulfillment, because they understand that the ache is the only thing that stays alive. Fulfillment is the end of song, and so the will ensures that the song never ends. It makes you mistake the echo for the source. You fall in love not with the person, but with the way they make your suffering feel meaningful. You crave not them, but the story you can tell yourself through them. That is the secret cruelty of desire. It uses illusion as oxygen. It feeds on images, not reality. The moment reality intrudes, the dream withers. That is why you mourn your idea of someone more deeply than the person themselves. Because when they leave, it is not just their body that disappears, it is your favorite illusion that dies. And in that death, something mercilessly beautiful happens. You glimpse yourself without anesthesia. The will, stripped of its disguise, stands before you naked, insatiable, eternal. You finally see that what you called love was never about the other. It was about the desperate hope that you could escape yourself. But you cannot. No one can. You are the wound that seeks its own healing in another wound, and the more you seek, the deeper it cuts. Desire is not romantic. It is tragic. It is the echo of existence trying to prove to itself that it matters. And in that echo, civilizations are built, songs are written, and hearts are broken, all because the universe cannot bear its own silence. Every civilization must lie to itself in order to survive. And love, that shimmering illusion of union, is one of its most necessary lies. In ancient times, they called it divine. In the modern age, we call it content. But the essence remains unchanged. Humanity cannot bear the rawness of existence without dressing it in romance. Look around. Our culture does not honor love. It manufactures it. Every song, every film, every advertisement whispers the same narcotic promise. Somewhere out there is someone who will make it all make sense. This is the religion of our age. The worship of completion through another human being. No gods, no heavens, only faces. The altar is the bed, the prayer, a text message sent at midnight. We call it connection, but in truth, it is commerce. Love has become the world's most profitable illusion. Corporations learned long ago what the poets already knew. The human heart is the most reliable consumer. Each dating app, each song, each brand offers a substitute for intimacy, a way to feed your hunger without ever satisfying it. Because satisfaction is bad for business. Longing, however, is endless revenue. Desire was once nature's trick to keep the species alive. Now it is capitalism's trick to keep the system alive. The will to life has become the will to consume. Swipe after swipe, profile after profile, not in search of love, but of distraction from the silent. A flickering screen has replaced the trembling heart, and each moment of rejection, each second of approval, teaches you the same lesson, that your worth is measured by how desirable you appear to others. This is the new social contract. To be loved, you must perform. To be desired, you must sell yourself. And to sell yourself, you must first learn to see yourself as a product. We have industrialized the most intimate aspect of being human. The market now owns your yearning. Think about the vocabulary of our time. Chemistry, compatibility, attraction, options. We speak of love like economists. We trade in emotional currencies, invest in others, diversify our attachments. Even heartbreak has been rebranded as growth. Quote, "The tragedy is not that love is commodified, but that we no longer even notice. We say we crave authenticity, yet we filter our faces, rehearse our vulnerability, and call it honesty. We are all actors auditioning for affection, and the applause we crave is not love, it is validation. Every social ritual, every public gesture of romance, a performance in the theater of self-promotion. Proposals staged for the camera. Anniversaries curated for the feed. Breakups translated into cryptic captions. Love has lost its privacy. It no longer belongs to two souls. It belongs to the audience. But the audience does not care about your happiness, only about your narrative. They will cheer when you fall in love. and feed on you when you fall apart. Even your suffering is content. Your heartbreak fuels algorithms. Your pain is data. And through it all, the will laughs because it has found a new mask to wear. It no longer needs the biological imperative. Now it thrives through technological repetition. The same hunger that once drove reproduction now drives engagement. Every like is a new form of courtship. Every follower, a substitute for intimacy. Every post, a digital mating call. You are not seeking love. You are seeking visibility, the illusion of mattering. Because in a world that moves too fast to care, being seen feels like survival. But to be seen is not to be known. To be admired is not to be loved. And to be desired is not to be valued. We live in an age where love has been replaced by mirrors, reflections of reflections, each more hollow than the last. You don't want love. You want to be seen loving. You want your tenderness witnessed, your devotion validated, your loneliness made aesthetic. You want the world to say, you are worthy of being desired. That is not love. That is the marketing of the self. The modern lover's tragedy is that even their most intimate emotions have been colonized by performance. The authentic self is now a brand. The soul connection is an algorithmic match, and the eternal bond expires when the dopamine runs out. We have turned love into entertainment, heartbreak into spectacle, and loneliness into a market. Even despair has a playlist. But it is not only commerce that corrupts love, it is culture itself. For centuries, humanity has been trained to confuse possession with passion. We do not love to know, we love to own. And ownership always ends in decay. The modern romance is not about union, it is about victory. We no longer say, I love you, but rather, I have you. The lover becomes a trophy of validation, proof that you still belong in the game. And once that validation fades, so does devotion. Because the will, restless and blind, cannot rest on what it already possesses. We build relationships like empires, conquering, consuming, collapsing. And when it's over, we call it growth instead of addiction. We mistake exhaustion for enlightenment. We mistake loneliness for independence. We mistake numbness for maturity. But beneath these new names, the same ancient pattern repeats. The will devouring itself through the illusion of love. The truth is unbearable, that connection was never the goal. Only continuation, the endless motion of wanting, acquiring, losing, and wanting again. Society rewards this cycle because it keeps its machinery turning. It depends on your incompleteness, your endless search for the missing piece. If everyone saw through the illusion at once, the entire world economy would collapse overnight. No more songs. No more weddings, no more industries built on yearning, so the illusion must remain sacred. It must feel holy, even as it chains you. That is why every culture sanctifies love not to protect your heart, but to protect the system. Love keeps you obedient. It makes you productive. It distracts you from the greater despair, that life itself has no final fulfillment to offer. So you keep playing your role. You keep chasing, performing, hoping, because the alternative seeing clearly feels unbearable. But clarity is not cruelty, it is liberation. When you finally see love as illusion, you are not condemned to bitterness. You are freed from the compulsion to chase what cannot exist. You begin to live without pretense, to look upon others not as saviors, but as fellow captives of the same ancient will. And perhaps, in that quiet understanding, something more honest begins to breathe not love as desire, but compassion as clarity. But that comes later. For now, the truth still burns. The performance continues, and the curtain never closes. There is a strange peace that arrives when the illusion finally dies. It is not joy. It is not freedom. It is a quiet kind of devastation, the kind that strips you bare until all that remains is truth. When love collapses, when desire turns to ash, the mind falls silent. No more stories, no more future tense. Only the raw pulse of existence, exposed and trembling. And in that silence, something ancient awakens, a clarity deeper than comfort, sharper than hope. You realize that pain is not the enemy. Pain is perception without anesthesia. It is life finally seen without disguise. Love never reveals truth in its beginning. It reveals it in its ending. At the start, you see beauty. At the end, you see being. You see that every embrace was temporary, every promise provisional, every joy already decaying the moment it bloomed. But instead of despairing, you begin to see a strange kind of beauty in the fragility. This is the secret wisdom of suffering. It teaches you to love without illusion. Not the person, not the story, but the fact of existence itself, bare and unadorned. Schopenhauer once said that the wise man does not curse pain, he observes it, because pain is the clearest evidence that the will to life still clings to you, still demands, still resists the truth of nothingness. But when you watch pain instead of fleeing it, something subtle shifts. You stop identifying with it. You begin to see that the you who suffers is not the whole of what you are. There is an awareness behind it still, untouched, eternal. This is the beginning of the philosopher's love, a love not directed outward, but inward, toward reality itself. To suffer consciously is to rebel against the will, because the will feeds on unconscious, striving the blind pursuit of satisfaction. When you turn your suffering into understanding, the will loses its grip. Most people suffer like animals, without reflection, without meaning. The philosopher suffers like fire consuming himself until nothing false remains. And in that burning he finds illumination. It is here, in heartbreak, that the self begins to dissolve into something wider than the personal. The grief that once felt personal becomes cosmic. You see that every creature suffers, that life itself is built on the bones of yearning. Every flower that blooms must first break the earth. Every sunrise rises over the corpses of yesterday's stars. Every I love you is whispered on the lips of mortality. To feel this is to see the world as it truly is tragic. Yes, but luminous in its tragedy. When you stop resisting pain, it begins to reveal its artistry. The ache of loss, the silence after betrayal, the cold space of solitude, they carve you into a vessel wide enough to hold truth. The ego shrinks, awareness expands. You stop demanding that life make you happy and start watching how it unfolds, indifferent, majestic, merciless. And in that observation, the need to possess fades. You no longer cling, you no longer chase. You no longer mistake temporary warmth for eternal meaning. You start to see beauty in things simply because they exist, not because they last, not because they are yours. You watch the way light falls on an empty street, the way rain writes temporary poems on glass, the way silence hums between two strangers who will never meet again. You realize that nothing belongs to you, and that this absence of ownership is the only true freedom. Pain becomes art, loss becomes language, and loneliness, once unbearable, becomes your teacher. Because only in solitude can you see without distortion. Only when no one is there to mirror your desires back to you can you face the enormity of existence without flinching. In solitude, you learn that peace is not found in the arms of another, but in the acceptance of what is. That beauty is not a promise of eternity, but the grace of transience. That love, at its highest form, is not possession, but perception. To love something truly is to see it without trying to own it, to hold it lightly, knowing it will pass, to let it go without bitterness, knowing it was never yours to keep. That is the love that suffering teaches, the love beyond desire, beyond will, beyond need. It does not seek to fill the void. It honors the void, because in that void, you finally hear what the noise of longing had drowned out, the quiet hum of being. You see that existence itself, raw, unadorned, temporary, is enough. You have lost the illusion, yes, but you have gained something more faithful than hope: clarity. You see that the heart's fractures are not failures, they are openings. Through them, reality enters. Through them, illusion escapes. This is the paradox of awakening: to find beauty not in what lasts, but in what passes. To find peace not in possession, but in surrender. When all illusions are stripped away, what remains is not despair, it is lucidity. And lucidity, though it offers no comfort, offers something greater: understanding. You no longer ask why love hurts. You understand that love hurts because life hurts, and love is the mirror in which life sees its own suffering reflected. To see that clearly and not turn away, that is what it means to live awake. And perhaps that is the beginning of a truer love. Not the love that seeks to complete the self, but the love that understands the self was never incomplete. Not the love that demands forever, but the love that bows before the transient and says, "This moment is enough." That is the beautiful suffering, the art of existing without anesthesia, the art of loving without illusion, the art of seeing without needing to believe.